Yhorm, old friend. I, Siegward of the Knights of Katarina, have come to uphold my promise. Let the sun shine upon this Lord of Cinder.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Ghostly French Toast here, and today we are doing a lore video on Yhorm the Giant, a Lord of Cinder from Dark Souls. Enough dawdling around, let's dive on in. Yhorm is basically a descendant from a great ancient conqueror, but we're going to get that in later. We're going to talk about the gameplay. So you find Yhorm in the Profane Capital, which is basically a part of the Irithyll Dungeon, like a subsection of Irithyll Dungeon, all that kind of stuff. He's basically in his throne room, which is basically the main part of the Profane Capital, besides like a swamp and a few towers, and there's some gargoyles around. And the way to defeat Yhorm is either just slowly killing him with a regular weapon, or by his throne, basically storm ruler, which is basically a giant slayer weapon. You can use that on Yhorm, which does a lot of damage each hit. And that's basically the main way to defeat Yhorm. And you see that if you do Siegward side quests, he uses one too, which we'll get to when we talk about the lore. And speaking of lore, let's talk about the lore, because this is a lore channel after all. Long ago, the Grand Giant Yhorm, the descendant of Ancient Conqueror, which is basically the Ancient Conqueror believed to be Yhorm's basically descendant from, is believed to be Wilhelm the Conqueror. You see that because in his crown description, it's basically he conquered many lands, and he basically grinded up the crowns of all the other kingdoms that he fell into making his own crown. That kind of makes sense because Wilhorn is a giant too, and it would make sense since Yhorm's a giant. So just felt like I should point that out. He was asked to lead the people who was once subjugated, serving as both their blade and shield. When there were those who doubted him, he even gave them a giant slaying sword, the storm ruler, to basically, if he ever got off course, you can kill him, to basically show that he's trustworthy. He risked everything for his people, fighting valiantly as one-man vanguard. It is stated that he lost someone very dear to him, and as a result he forsook his great shield, and you can get his great shield as a bustle weapon. Fun fact. Afterwards, he noticed he notched his machete to basically allow him to use two hands, giving him an even more ferocious fighting style. At some point, lonely Yhorm befriended Siegward of Katarina, the Onion Knight, who became a dear friend of his. And you can basically summon Siegward as basically for the boss fight, and he uses the Storm Ruler too. Due to a curse triggered by 4 female relatives of an unknown oracle, which also turned them into ceaseless greedy creatures, you can see one of them with like the dog hand thing in the Profane Capital. The Profane Flame, a flame that goes out, formed this hellish flame out of the sky, destroying the city, yet consuming the not but human flesh, incinerating all the human inhabitants. The flame, despite deriving from the dark, because one of the pyromancy spells that you can get is basically the Profane Flame and all that kind of stuff, and that's something I felt like I should point out. Actively sought to harm humanity, Yhorm became a Lord of Cinder. And his people didn't really respect him as a Lord of Cinder, because they would take the Lord, quote unquote, for them, Lord of Cinder. They basically made fun of him for being a Lord, and didn't basically believe he should become a Lord, if that makes any sense. As they spoke insincerely about his role. And the reason Yhorm became a Lord of Cinder was to put the Profane Flame to rest. Before burning in the first flame, he gave his other storm ruler Siegward, and that's, as I said, you can see him using that in the fight, who promised to end Yhorm's suffering if he ever returned to life, because we see that when Sigurd in the opening cutscene, he's like, I came to uphold my duty. And Sigurd's he's basically gonna end Yhorm because he came back to life. We don't really know why he took his throne. It is uncertain, but due to the reason for his sacrifice and his reclusive nature, it's most likely that he felt too much despair at the fate of his kingdom, his people, his legacy, and he didn't want to sacrifice to the first flame because we know from one of the Lord Cinder himself, we know that it's a painful thing. You can tell you're just sitting in a bunch of flames, you ignite yourself. So it kind of makes sense. Yhorm is probably one of the sadder stories in the Dark Souls, basically timeline, because he basically did everything to prove that he had his people's best interest in mind, but they didn't care whatsoever. And it basically made him become the Lord of Cinder who he is today. He's basically so aggressively, he got rid of something, basically the line of defense for the kingdom and all that. So, hope you enjoyed this video on Lord of Cinder. The next video is going to be on a Titanfall video, so see you next time. And go to French Toast. Bye.